In the dead of night in December of 1972, in the war-torn city of Belfast, a widowed mother of 10 children named Jean McConville was dragged from her home by a group of masked figures. Her children, clinging to her legs, were kicked away. They watched as their mother was pushed into a van and driven off into the darkness. She was never seen alive again. For decades, her 10 orphaned children would search for an answer to one single, devastating question. Who took our mother, and why? The answer was a secret that almost everyone in their community knew, but that no one would ever say out loud. Patrick Radden Keefe's masterful book, Say Nothing, begins with this single, haunting crime, but it spirals out to tell the entire epic, tragic, and deeply human story of the conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles. This is more than a true crime book. It is a profound philosophical meditation on the nature of memory, the corrosive power of secrets, and the human cost of fanatical belief. It's a story that asks a series of profound and uncomfortable questions. What turns idealistic young people into ruthless killers? What does it do to a human soul to carry a terrible secret for a lifetime? And in a country trying to build a fragile peace, what is the role of truth, and what is the price of justice? The spark in the tinderbox. To understand the disappearance of Jean McConville, you first have to understand the world that created it. The Troubles was a low-grade 30-year civil war that tore Northern Ireland apart from the late 1960s to the late 1990s. The conflict was a complex and bitter struggle between two communities. On one side were the Protestants or Unionists, who were the majority. They were fiercely loyal to the British Crown and wanted Northern Ireland to remain a part of the United Kingdom. On the other side were the Catholics or nationalists, who were the minority. They faced systematic discrimination in housing, jobs, and political power, and they dreamed of a day when Northern Ireland would break away from the UK and unite with the Republic of Ireland to the south. For decades, this was a cold conflict. But in the late 1960s, inspired by the civil rights movement in America, the Catholic community began to protest for their rights. These peaceful protests were often met with brutal violence from the police and Protestant paramilitary groups. The British Army was sent in to keep the peace, but they were soon seen by the Catholic community as an occupying force. Into this tinderbox, a new and far more ruthless organization emerged: the Provisional Irish Republican Army, or the IRA. The IRA saw themselves as freedom fighters, as the legitimate army of an occupied country. They believed that peaceful protest had failed, and that the only language the British government would understand was the language of violence. They began a brutal and bloody campaign of bombings, assassinations, and guerrilla warfare. They were fighting to force the British out of Ireland and to create a unified socialist republic. This was the secret, shadowy, and violent world that would consume the lives of our main characters. The Believers, a study in radicalization. Say Nothing is not a dry political history. It is a deeply personal story, told through the lives of the people who were on the front lines of the conflict. Perhaps the most compelling of these figures is Dolours Price. When we first meet her, she is a brilliant, beautiful, and fiercely idealistic young student. Her family has a long and storied history in the Republican movement. She is not a monster, she is a true believer. She sees the injustice and discrimination around her, and she burns with a righteous desire to create a new and better Ireland. For her, joining the IRA is not a choice for violence, it's a choice for justice. She becomes one of the IRA's most dedicated and trusted operatives, a member of a secret elite unit known as the Unknowns. She is involved in bombings. She is chosen to be the only woman in the unit that carries out the first car bombing campaign in London. She is arrested, and in prison, she and her sister Marion lead a brutal 200-day hunger strike that brings them to the brink of death, a protest to be treated as political prisoners, not common criminals. Alongside Dolours Price, we meet Brendan Hughes. Hughes is a legendary IRA commander from the backstreets of Belfast. He is a tough, charismatic, and deeply respected leader. He is a master of guerrilla warfare, a man who has spent years in and out of prison for his cause. But as the conflict drags on, he becomes increasingly disillusioned. He sees the movement he loves being corrupted by pointless violence and by the cynical calculations of politics. And then there is the third and most enigmatic figure, Gerry Adams. Adams is a brilliant political strategist. He starts as a young activist, and according to Keefe and many of the IRA members in the book, he rises to become one of the most powerful and secretive commanders in the entire organization. He is the man who understands that the war cannot be won with bombs alone. He is the architect of the long, slow, and brilliant political strategy to transform the IRA from a terrorist group into a legitimate political movement, Sinn Féin. Through the interwoven lives of these three people, the fanatical believer, the disillusioned soldier, and the master politician, Keefe gives us a panoramic and deeply human view of the IRA from the inside. The crime, the disappearance of Jean McConville. Woven through this epic story of the conflict is the small, quiet, and devastating story of one family, the story of Jean McConville and her 10 children. Jean McConville was a mixed marriage. She was a Protestant who had converted to Catholicism to marry her Catholic husband. After her husband died of cancer, she was left to raise her 10 children alone in the Divis Flats, a grim high-rise housing project in the heart of a Catholic IRA stronghold in Belfast. She was poor, she was a widow, and she was an outsider. One night she found a wounded British soldier on the street outside her apartment building. She brought a pillow and a blanket to him as he lay dying. This simple act of human compassion was seen by some in the neighborhood as an act of betrayal. A rumor began to spread that she was an informer, a tout, who was secretly working for the British Army. According to Keefe's investigation, the rumor was false. But in the paranoid and brutal world of the IRA, the accusation was a death sentence. The local IRA unit, allegedly under the command of Gerry Adams, made the decision to disappear her. The goal was not just to kill her but to erase her, to make an example of her that would terrify anyone else who might even think of talking to the authorities. The night of the abduction is a scene of pure horror. Her own neighbors, people she knew, put on masks and dragged her away from her screaming children. The children were left alone, to fend for themselves. They were scattered to various abusive orphanages and foster homes, their lives shattered. For decades they searched for their mother's body and for the truth. They knew, as everyone in the neighborhood knew, that the IRA had taken her. But the community was bound by a powerful, unwritten law. The first and most important rule of the Troubles was, you say nothing. The politics of peace, the silence of justice. As the years go by, the nature of the conflict begins to change. The endless cycle of violence is leading to a stalemate. The IRA, though never defeated militarily, realizes that they cannot win through violence alone. And the British government realizes that they cannot crush the IRA. This is where Gerry Adams, the political strategist, takes center stage. He begins the long, difficult, and secret process of negotiating a peace. He masterfully transforms himself and his movement from a paramilitary organization into a political one. He goes from being a wanted man to being a world statesman, shaking hands with prime ministers and presidents. His central public claim throughout this entire process is that he was never, ever a member of the IRA. In 1998, the Good Friday Agreement is signed and an uneasy peace finally comes to Northern Ireland. The bombs stop, the soldiers go home. It is a monumental political achievement, but the peace comes at a price. In order to get both sides to lay down their arms, an implicit deal is made. The crimes of the past, the thousands of murders committed by both Republican and Loyalist paramilitaries, would be quietly set aside. The prisoners would be released. There would be no Truth and Reconciliation Commission, no trials for the old soldiers. The unspoken agreement was that in order to secure the future, they had to bury the past. For the new generation, this peace was a miracle. But for the families of the victims, like the children of Jean McConville, it was a bitter pill to swallow. The men who had murdered their mother were now walking the streets, some of them celebrated as peacemakers and political leaders. They had peace, but they had no justice. And they still did not know where their mother was buried. The ghosts in the archive, the Boston College tapes. For years, the secrets of the Troubles seemed to be buried forever. But then, a quiet academic project at Boston College in the United States threatened to bring them all back to the surface. The project was the brainchild of a journalist and a former IRA member. The idea was to create a secret oral history of the conflict. They invited former paramilitaries from both sides to give recorded confessional interviews about their lives in the secret war. The promise was absolute. The tapes would be sealed until after the interviewee's death. Believing their stories were safe, the old soldiers began to talk. They told the truth about everything. Brendan Hughes, now old and sick and disillusioned with Gerry Adams's political path, gave a series of explosive interviews, detailing his time in the IRA and naming Adams as his former commander who had ordered the abduction and murder of Jean McConville. Dolours Price, also racked by trauma and a feeling of betrayal, told her own story in brutal, unapologetic detail, also implicating Adams. They believed they were speaking to history. But then, the past came roaring back into the present. A new police investigation into the McConville case was opened, and the police in Northern Ireland, using an international treaty, issued a subpoena to Boston College, demanding the tapes. This created a massive legal and ethical firestorm. It pitted two fundamental principles against each other. On one side was the right of historians and journalists to protect their sources and to create a historical record. On the other side was the right of a family to get justice for their murdered mother. The battle over the Boston College tapes is the final, thrilling act of the book. It is a story about the explosive power of truth and the question of whether the past can, or should, ever truly be laid to rest. The project that was designed to preserve the memory of the conflict ended up becoming the very thing that threatened to tear the fragile peace apart. The ultimate message of Say Nothing is a haunting one. It shows how the ghosts of a violent past never truly disappear. They linger in the memories of the survivors, in the secrets of the perpetrators, and in the very soil of a place. The book is a masterpiece of investigative journalism, but it is also a work of deep philosophical importance. It has no easy heroes or villains, only a cast of deeply human characters who were caught in the tragic, inexorable sweep of history. It is a profound inquiry into the human cost of our most passionate beliefs. If you believe that the most important stories are the ones that force us to confront the most difficult truths, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the complex moral questions that lie at the heart of the human story. The project that was designed to preserve the memory of the conflict ended up becoming the very thing that threatened to tear the fragile peace apart. The ultimate message of Say Nothing is a haunting one. It shows how the ghosts of a violent past never truly disappear. They linger in the memories of the survivors, in the secrets of the perpetrators, and in the very soil of a place. The book is a masterpiece of investigative journalism, but it is also a work of deep philosophical importance. It has no easy heroes or villains, only a cast of deeply human characters who were caught in the tragic, inexorable sweep of history. It is a profound inquiry into the human cost of our most passionate beliefs. If you believe that the most important stories are the ones that force us to confront the most difficult truths, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the complex moral questions that lie at the heart of the human story. The ultimate message of Say Nothing is a haunting one. It shows how the ghosts of a violent past never truly disappear. They linger in the memories of the survivors, in the secrets of the perpetrators, and in the very soil of a place. The book is a masterpiece of investigative journalism, but it is also a work of deep philosophical importance. If you believe that the most important stories are the ones that force us to confront the most difficult truths, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the complex moral questions that lie at the heart of the human story.